This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good morning, and I apologize for my extended absence between what do we have going down? Between all the Yom Tovim, which were all either Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and then my trip to Israel, and then COVID. It's it's been a little while. So we pick up with Parshat Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah. Before we go to there, let's just look in Parshat Lech Lecha, page 74 in our Stone Chumashim, and it's Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Tet Vav. Here is where we have Sarai's name being changed. Vayomer Elokim, so page 74, verse 15. Vayomer Elokim El Avraham, Elokim said to Avraham, Sarai Ishtecha, Sarai your wife, Lo Tikra et Shema Sarai. We will no longer call her by the name of Sarai, Ki Sarah Shema. Rather, her name will be Sarah, Uveirachti ota, and I will bless her, V'gam natati mimena lecha ben. I will give from her to you a son, meaning you will have a son, not just this Yishmael son born to you from Hagar. You will have a son from Sarah, Uveirachtiha, and I will bless her, V'haita legoyim, and she will become nations, give rise to nations, umalchei amim mimena yiyu. Kings of people will rise from her. Avram fell on his face, vayitzchak, and he laughed, but this was a laugh of happiness, as opposed to in uh, as opposed to Sarah, who, when she heard what the passers-by, she had more of when the travelers said, a year from now you'll have a child, that was more of a scoffing laugh. And as we discussed over Shabbos, which we're not going to go into now, but the Ramban, very important, right? The Ramban asks, why are we taking Sarah to task over here? Avram heard from God that he would have a child. We don't have any evidence that Avram told this to Sarah. And then Sarah hears there are these three passers-by. Avram makes them wash their feet because they were idolaters in his mind, and they would worship the dust of their feet. And then they said they have a whole meal, and a year from now, Sarah will have a child, and she laughs. It's a joke. Who are these drunken guys? So why are we taking Sarah to task for laughing? And Ramban says, because Hayipale me Hashem davar. There is nothing that is hidden from Hashem. There is nothing that Hashem can't do. And if a person hears a blessing that they hope will happen, their response should be, Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, right? With God's help, if only, right? From your mouth to God's ears, as the expression goes. That should have been her response. But I want to focus over here on this name change of Sarah. And Rashi explains, Lo tikra et shema Sarai, don't call her name Sarai. The mashma, which implies Sarai li, she is an officer to me, velo la'acherim, and not to others. Rather, Sarah stam shma, shetehei Sarah I'll call. She is the Sar, Sarah. She is the officer. She is in control of everyone. She's the leader. She's the Sar over everyone, not just my officer. She is a Sar over all. Let's now jump to our Parsha, page 106, Perek Chaf Gimel, Pasuk Aleph. Vayiyu Chaye Sarah, and it was the Chaye Sarah, the the lifetime of Sarah, Mea Shana, 100 years, Esrim Shana, 20 years, Vesheva Shanim, and 7 years, Shnei Chaye Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah. A bit of a strange pasuk. Her years were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, the years of the life of Sarah. Right? A lot of redundancy, a lot going on over here. Rashi famously points out that the reason why it says year after each of these, so when she was 100, she was like 20 in regard to chait, in regards to being clean of any sin. Bat chaf, and ubat chaf kabat zayin liofi. When she was 20, she was like 7 in terms of her beauty. And then Rashi explains, Shnei Chaye Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah, Kulan Shavin Litova. They were all equally good. Okay, so let's look at this. All right, who would we say is considered to be more beautiful? A woman when she's 20 or a woman when she is 7? What would you say?
It depends how you define beauty.
Okay, explain, Gabriella.
Well, it could be the physical attributes, but maybe Rashi meant the inner qualities.
Okay, even so, Gabriella, I think the inequalities of a 7-year-old are certainly underdeveloped,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think normally we would say that a woman at 20 is more beautiful than a girl at 7.
But someone who's 7 has an innocence, no?
Beautiful, beautiful, right? The beauty over here is an innocence about one's own beauty. That's what we're talking about over here. Oh, sorry. There are people here. Hello, Kathy, from my class in the sanctuary. I'm going to move over. Okay, sorry. Pardon me for just a moment. Actually, let me just take this. That'll be easier. Okay, good. I only saw your text when when I responded. Okay, good. So, actually, good. Okay, 1 second. We're doing Chaye Sarah. Okay, good. So we have some in-person attendees. Okay, very good. All right. So on page 106, so we started already a little bit over here. And so we had the first pasuk in the Parsha, the years of the life of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, the years of the life of Sarah. Rashi says when she was 100, she was like 20 in terms of sin. And when she was 20, she was like 7 in terms of beauty. And then Rashi says, Shnei Chaye Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah, they were all equally good. So it seems a little bit strange because we said that a woman is certainly more beautiful at 20 than she is at 7. But as Elisheva said, what we're talking about over here is more, hello. Oh, wow. So good to see you, Rosa. Rosa. Needs to be an old song. Atahuva Shali, Kama Shali. So good to see you, Rosa. Beautiful.
I'm glad to see you.
Good.
How are you doing?
Thank God I'm doing. Thank you. I mentioned that between the holidays and then Israel and then COVID last week, it's been a while since we've all gotten together. But
So you were in Israel?
I was in Israel, yeah, and then I came home, and then I had COVID. Yeah, it's been a.
But in Israel you were.
In Israel, I was fine, Baruch
Yeah, but
Hashem.
we also were in Israel.
Yeah.
And Greece, Turkey,
Nice.
Cyprus, and we were
Nice.
fine. And
Nice.
now we came from Mexico. Like,
Beautiful.
timeshare.
Retirement sounds good. Okay. So, right. So over here, when we're saying that the beauty of Sarah as a 20-year-old was like that of a 7-year-old, it means in terms of the innocence, right? In terms of that innocent beauty. And Rav Soloveitchik says a very beautiful thing here also. When we think of a 7-year-old, right? 7-year-old, their eyes are wide open, right? Oh, amazing, right? Why is the sky blue, and why is this, and why is that, and why is there sand by the sea, and right? They're just like this sponge, just looking at the world with this wide-eyed wonder, right?
In my childhood, 100,000 whys.
100,000 whys, yeah. Right, and then we get older. At 20, right, we're starting to get a little bit jaded in terms of that excitement, that wonder of the world. But we're taking on a certain degree of we have a drive, we have this determination. I'm going to accomplish, I'm going to make a difference in the world. And then by age 100, well, they are not going to make such a difference anymore in the world, but we have a certain perspective and a certain understanding and a certain resonance with all that which goes on. The problem is that we often leave each of these stages behind us. The greatness of Sarah was that she was able to take it with her as she went forward, right, each time. That was the greatness of Sarah, that she didn't lose that wide-eyed wonder of a child, even as she had that determination of a 20-year-old, and didn't lose the wide-eyed wonder and that determination even when she had that resonance and that perspective of as a 100-year-old person. But the last part of Rashi in the pasuk is very strange. Shnei Chaye Sarah. We reiterate the years of the life of Sarah. And Rashi says, Kulan Shavin Litova. They were all equally good. And we started in my office at the end of Lech Lecha. You missed this part, that her name was changed from Sarai, which means my officer, to Sarah, an officer over the whole world. Now, all of her years were equally good. Let's hear just how equally good. She had a storied life, didn't she? Let's see. She left everything behind following Abraham to the land of Israel. Barren. Can't have a child. Come to Israel, there's Canaan at that point. There's a famine. So they have to pack up and leave Israel. Where do they go to? They go to Egypt. Avram introduces his sister, Sarah. The Pharaoh says, I'd like to get to know your sister, and takes her into the palace. And then they are smitten, right? And then, right, she is released. And it goes on, and not having any children, and desperate to have children. And then she brings in her, a surrogate mother, so to speak. And she tells Avram to marry Hagar, the maidservant. The Ibaneh mimena, I will be built through her. I'll raise the child. She'll be the surrogate mother, but it'll be as if I had a child. But that was not the attitude that Hagar had. That was not the attitude that Yishmael had. And then, right, and then she's told, right, that she will have a child, and she does have a child. She does have a child, but she laughs mockingly, as we discussed earlier. When she first heard that, she's taken to task for that reaction. And then there's a child, and then Yishmael is agitating this Yitzchak, this Isaac, and then Yishmael is sent away. Right? And then, along the way, she's taken by another king, Avimelech, also into his palace. Right? The sister thing, which didn't work so well the first time, was tried a second time with, what they say, when you're expecting to do the same thing with different results. Right? Actually, Ramban, I mean, I don't want to just be, just dismissive of Avram, but Ramban says that this was a big mistake that Avraham made to endanger his wife by putting her into such a situation. To be fair, when he said, this is my sister, he said, this is my married sister. Okay, so he wasn't necessarily, just, putting her out there like Lot offered to do to his daughters, right? If he says, this is my wife, then they can very easily take care of that problem, and presto, she's no longer a married woman. If he says, this is my married sister, then they can't take care of that. But whatever the case is, it's been a rough go. And then, of course, last week's Parsha ended with the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And according to Rashi brings the measures. There are different approaches. Some say that Yitzchak was 12 or 14 or 15, different ages. Rashi, based on the Medrash, says that Isaac was 37 years old at the Akedah. How do we get that? Well, he said, the Medrash says, these opinions say, that the death of Sarah comes right after Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. These two events were tied one to the other. And Rashi actually says that when she heard about the story of the Akedah, and they were just about to tell her the part, but Isaac was not slaughtered. But before they got to that point, her neshama left her. Now, she was 90 when Isaac was born. She died at the age of 127. And this happened, according to this medrash, right after Akedas Yitzchak. That puts Yitzchak at 37 years old at the Akedah. So this is the storybook life, right, from the romance novels, right? This is the storybook life of Sarah. Kulan Shavin Litova. They were all equally good. And this is the son, not Sarai, not the officer, but this was the Sarah, the one who was the officer, the one in control over everything. What are we talking about over here? What control did Sarah have over here? Right? She's being taken by this king, taken by that king, led over here, led over there. They were all equally good. What is Rashi? How does Rashi have the audacity to say, after all that we've read until this point, that it's been a cakewalk over here. Such a beautiful, simple, nice, good life. Yes, Jenny.
She was the officer of her own self and of her emotions, maybe, and of her being able to see the positive in whatever was dealt her.
Okay. Right? As Viktor Frankl so eloquently and gloriously said, the last freedom that a person has that can never be taken away from a person is the freedom to decide how to react to a situation that one is in. And we often think that we can control others, but we never can. The only one that hopefully we can control is ourselves. That is the only area of our jurisdiction. And if someone can be in complete control of oneself, and you see this with some people sometimes, and it really is uplifting when you see someone in a difficult situation and they are maintaining their calmness, their equanimity, their ability to think carefully. Right? The Gemara compares drunkenness to anger and to idolatry, all the same. But drunkenness and anger, right? When I'm drunk, I think I'm making a lot of sense. I think what I'm doing is a good idea, right? When I'm angry, I think what I'm doing it makes sense, is a good idea. Invariably, it's not. So when a person can be in control of themselves, as we all go through the twists and turns that life brings us, if a person can be in control, then they are truly a Sarah, an officer over the world, right? Because it's only how I can control my reactions and my interactions with the world. That's all that I can hope to control. And such a person is truly a Sar, truly an officer. Kulan Shavin Latova, they're all equally good. How do we define good? Right? If we're defining good as pizza and ice cream and a beautiful beach, then it's not all equally good. How would we be defining good if we were to say that by Sarah's life they were all shavin, all equally good? What definition of good, of tov, would fit over here?
Her deeds, her deeds, what she did, her deeds.
Okay, her deeds, her reactions were good.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Her reactions were good. But I think we could take it a step back also.
Saikam Zutov, that everything happened was Hashem's will.
Okay, so Jenny said we have that term, gam zu litova. Also, this is for the good. I saw a beautiful, beautiful idea in from the Slonim Rebbe Zatzal. The Gemara tells us the same way that we thank God for the good, we also have to thank God for the bad. And we have psukim, we have verses that we say in Hallel, which attest to this. One pasuk says, Kos Hashem Esa, Kos Yishuot Esa Uv'Shem Hashem Ekra, the cup of redemption I lift up, and the name of God I call out. Another pasuk says, tzara v'yagon emtza, tzara, difficulties, yagon, and hardships, emtza, I find, uveshem Hashem ekra, and in the name of God I call out. So the same thing, right? Kos Yeshua, the cup of redemption, I call out to God. Troubles, difficulties, sighing, I call out to God. But the Slonim Rabbi points out that there's a difference there, a subtle difference. The pasuk of I lift my cup of redemption and I call out to God, that's all one pasuk. The other one, one pasuk ends, Tzara v'yagon emtza, I find difficulties and hardships. End of pasuk. The next pasuk begins, Uveshem Hashem ekra, and the name of God I call out. So why is there this subtle difference? That one there, the redemption and the calling out to God is in the same verse, and the other one has a split end of one verse, start of the next verse, not the same verse? Because we need to accept the sorrow, the difficulties, as having purpose, as having reason, but we're not expected to react the same way. Oh, Baruch Hashem, thank God. We need to have a little bit of a pause. There needs to be a sof pasuk, an end of a pasuk, and then we could start the next verse, the next pasuk, and recognize the good in it. But I would say tov can be defined as that which will enable me to grow, to become a better person, a better human being, a better Jew. That's ultimately what tov is going to be. We say that God is the epitome of tov, and he gives out tov. Is everything in our life tov? Is everything in our life hunky-dory? It depends how we define tov. Life is meant to be an opportunity, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to become better. And some of that is when things go well, and more often that is when things are not going exactly the way that we had hoped. They were kulan shavin latova. With all of her hardships, she became the Sarah Imenu. Right? She doesn't get as much billing as Avraham. Right? Avram throughout the world today. Right? We had the Abraham Accords. We didn't have the Sarah Accords. But she was the partner par excellence of Avram. Not to say that he didn't make mistakes, not to say that she didn't make mistakes. That same Ramban who says that Avraham erred when he said that Sarah was his sister, that same Ramban says that Sarah erred when she came down really hard on Hagar. She came down too hard on Hagar. And Ramban says, and we're living it today, right? You see the headlines this morning, 3 Israelis were killed by a terrorist outside of Ariel. Ariel is an area in Judea, Samaria, a big university. My son Shraga, that's where he studied his engineering. Big university there. And Ramban says that because of this overly harsh reaction of Sarah to Hagar, that is why Hagar's descendants are going to be pitted against us as they are today. Hagar's descendants are is the Arab world, the Middle Eastern world, we would call it. So not to say that mistakes aren't made. We all make mistakes. And Ramban emphasizes the Torah is letting us know no one's perfect. Avram made mistakes. Sarah made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But Shiva kulan shavin litova. They were all equally good, meaning that she utilized each of those opportunities, whether she made the right call the first time or didn't, but she utilized that to become the Sarah that she became, to become that person. There's a famous story of Medrash that Rabbi Akiva saw that his students were starting to fall asleep. So he said, Sarah lived 127 years. Where else do we find the number 127?
In the story of Esther?
Beautiful. The story of Esther, right? So the Medrash says, thank you, Gabriella, that in the merit of the 127 years that Sarah lived, she merited to have this granddaughter, or this granddaughter merited, this Esther, great granddaughter merited to rule over. She became the queen to Achashverosh, who ruled over 127 provinces. What might a connection or some connections be between Sarah and Esther?
They both were rulers.
Okay, they both, let's come around to that. Just on a more of a story level, a life story level, what similarities did they share? What experiences did they share?
They were given or taken by the kings of the land.
Okay.
Or Egypt.
Good.
Not a good experience.
Right? Certainly, both of them were taken into the palace or palaces. Sarah twice, Esther once, taken into the palace of a foreign king. Okay, good. Along the way, they both had to hide their identity to a certain degree, right? Esther would not tell of her identity, and Sarah, right? Yeah, that's my brother, right? Sarah also needed to disguise her identity, right, to a certain degree. And also, I think we could take it on the deeper level to what Gabriella was saying also, that they both were dealing with really crazy, hard situations. Sarah, we went through, right? Esther was the epitome of an orphan, right? The Gemara tells us, based on the pasuk, Ki ein la'av ve'ein, that after conception, her father died. After birth, her mother died. So she's an orphan. And then she's taken into the palace, and she has all of the wealth, all of the power at her fingertips, and she is willing to risk it all for the sake of her people, as opposed to being safe there in the palace. Right? This was not an easy go, and yet she also ruled as Sarah ruled. Meaning, as we mentioned before, Sarah ruled over all of these situations in regard to her response and how she was going to stand up to it. And Esther nursed that ability from Sarah, that she too was able to become this Sarah, this ruler, this officer, and still keep her perspective and still keep herself as she was going through all of that.
Rabbi?
Yes.
May I add something on what Miss Jenny said about Gamzu Latova? That's a
Sure.
central theme in Megillus Esther, because Hashem's name is not mentioned at all. And so being able to look, even when it's not very obvious how Hashem, he's not doing these open miracles, but seeing in all of the details that everything synthesized together. You're ruler of all of your years and all of the things that happen. You see the bigger picture. That's like the connection between two.
Beautiful, 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 right? Gabriella pointed out, God's name is not mentioned in Megillat Esther, but you see the hand of God in all that transpires. And in the Kulan Shavin Latova, I can only make all of these events, all of these situations Tov, if I see the hand of God in that which is taking place, and I'm able to react accordingly. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful idea. So Sarah dies and Avram comes, lispod l'Sarah, v'liv kota, right? To eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. And he gets up and speaks to the people of Chet, an area there, and he wants to get a burial place for Sarah. Let me just read through this in Hebrew, in English quickly. He said to them, saying, verse 4, I'm an alien, a resident amongst you. Grant me an estate for a burial site with you, that I may bury my dead before me. And the children of Chet answered Avram, saying to him, Hear us, my Lord, you are a prince of God in our midst. In the choices of our burial places, bury your dead. None of us will withhold his burial place from you, from burying your dead. Avram rose up, bowed to the members of the council, and said, If it's your will to bury my dead from before me, heed me, intercede with Ephron, the son of Zohar. Let him grant me the cave of Machpelah, which is his. So Avram wanted to buy simply what? The cave of Machpelah. Where is it? On the edge of his field. Let him grant it to me for its full price in your midst as an estate for a burial site. Ephron was sitting in the midst of the children of Chet. Ephron the Chiti responded and said, in front of all there, come to his gate, saying, verse 11, No, my Lord, heed me. I have given you the field, and as for the cave that is in it, I've given it to you. I've given it to you, bury your dead. What change did he just subtly make over here? It seems the cave just moved. Where was it when Avram was talking, and where is it when Ephron is talking? According to Avram, where is this cave? At the edge of his field. According to Ephron, where is it? And as for the cave, Asher Bo, that is in it, in the middle of the field. Right? What, the cave just moved? Right? The cave was, as Avram said, at the edge of the field. But what's Ephron doing over here? Ephron is saying, it's a package deal. You can't have the right? It's the field and the cave, right? But don't worry, I'll give it all to you as a gift. Avram bows down. He spoke to Ephron in the hearing, verse 12. Oh, you hear me, please. I give the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there, right? Let me bury my dead there, right? Fair enough. I give the price of the field. Avram understood where this Arab shuk negotiations was heading. Okay, we're not talking about the cave anymore. What are we discussing? We're discussing the entire field. Fair enough. I want to give the price. Ephron said, listen to me. I want to give it to you as a gift. I want to give it to you as a gift. Arba. Eretz Arba Meot Shekel Kesef. A field that's just worth just 400. Just 400 silver shekels. What's that between me and you? My friend, come here. For you, I do special. Right? What's that between us? So what did he do here? Such a negotiating tactic. I want to give it to you for free. Right? And then he names a price of 400. Can Avram start to negotiate the price? I'll give you 300? No. Take it for free. I don't want any money. I don't want your money. You want to pay for it? This is the price, but you don't have to pay for it. It's free. Vayishma Avram. Avram heard exactly what was going on, and he paid out that money, right, the 400 shekel in negotiable currency. Okay, a few things to go through over here. We know Avram had his 10 challenges, the 10 nisyonot. Typically, we view which was the 10th, which was the hardest one, which was the 10th. Akedos Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, right? That is the zenith. That's the top of the mountain that he reached. But some, Rabbeinu Yonah, says that no, that was number 9. What was number 10? Here he is. He just lost his wife. The wife that he had, his wife of decades and decades and decades. And now he needs to deal with nothing against used car salesmen, but now he needs to deal with a used car salesman. Right? A swindler over here. To try to get land, a burial place, in the land that God had told him will be yours, but not yet. So often when we are going through our own personal mashber, our own personal difficulties, challenges, right? We don't want to deal with other people. Right? We don't have the headspace. We don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the patience to deal with other people. I remember when my father, blessed memory, passed away. I was living in Israel. I came to the States for the Shiva, for the funeral, and for the Shiva. And in the middle of Shiva, Natalie then came with Devora, who was a little girl at the time. And then in the middle of Shiva, I and all my siblings, we each went back to our respective communities. And I left the Shiva house to go to the airport to come back to Israel, where I was living at the time. And as we're walking out of the house, there's a person who's walking his dog. And my first thought was, who cares about a dog? Who cares about a dog? Why do you have a dog? Obviously, I didn't say that to the person. But that's where one's head is when one has suffered a deep personal loss. And what is a greater, more deep personal loss than Avram losing Sarah? And now he's got to deal with this. And with all that, he is respectful. He is understanding. He is kind. He doesn't snap at them at all. That was the greatest challenge. But the Vilna Gaon points out a very interesting thing. We have to look in the Hebrew for this. Let's go back to page 106. Verse 4. I am a sojourner amongst you. Give me a gravesite amongst you. Ve'ekbara meti. And I will bury my dead. Okay, verse 6, they respond, listen, you're a leader amongst us. No one will hold you back. Kavor, bury meitecha, bury your dead. The second time we have that. Right? In the chosen places, you can bury your dead. No one will hold back from you from, again, second time in verse 6, mikvar meitecha, from burying your dead. Avram bows down to them, and he says, verse 8, if you will allow me to do what? Verse 8, to bury my dead, that's number 4. Bring me Ephron, right? And let me have that cave at the edge of his field. I'll pay full money for it. Ephron then answers, we turn the page, and verse 11, no, listen, it's all yours. I've given it to you. Number 5 in verse 11, Kavor meitecha, bury your dead. Avram speaks to Ephron and says, you listen to me. I want to give you the money for the field. Number 6 in verse 13, ve'ekbara et meti. I will bury my dead there. Ephron answers and says, no, 400. What's that between us? Number 7, Meitcha Kavor. Not bury the dead, but you're dead, you can go ahead and bury. So we have 7 mentions, the Vilna Gaon points out. We have 7 mentions here of bury the dead, 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 6 times. And the 7th time, the dead you can bury. The Vilna Gaon points out, well, let me ask a question first before we get to that. Why did Avram want specifically this area as a burial place? Who was there already? Cheryl?
Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava were buried there. That Avram understood, knew, and therefore he wanted that to be the burial place. Who is going to be buried there? Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. Those 6 are going to be buried there. Was there a 7th of sorts?
Esav.
Esav's head.
You're right.
The Medrash tells us that when the tribes were bringing Yaakov from Egypt back to Israel, to Hebron to be buried there, Esav came along and said, hey, that's my spot. I'm the firstborn. And they said, no, you sold the Bechorah to our father Yaakov, to Jacob. It's his spot. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Prove it. Well, we have a document. Well, where's the document? The document is back in Egypt. So Naphtali, who was very, very swift, see, he was going to run back and get that document from Egypt and to show it. Along comes Hushim ben Dan. Hushim was the son of Dan, and he was hard of hearing, if not completely deaf. And he sees that there is this whole to-do going on. And he asks, what's happening here? And they said, oh, there's a debate. Who's the rightful owner over here? So Esav's claiming it's his. We know it's Yaakov's. It's our father's, our grandfather's. So Naphtali's going to run back, and he's going to. He says, what are you talking about? Our grandfather, our father Jacob is going to lay here in this state until we wait for Naphtali to run back to Egypt and come back here. He took out his sword and he cut off the head of Esav, and that rolled into Marata Machpelah, that rolled into the tomb of the patriarchs, and therefore ultimately 7 were buried there. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah, and the head of Esav. That, the Vilna Gaon says, is why in the negotiations here, the Torah has 7 times about burying the dead. But, he points out, 6 places it says, bury the dead. In one place, the last one, it says, the dead you shall bury. What does that show us, he said? And this brings us back to what we started with Sarah. Our sages say tzaddikim, the righteous people, even in their death, they're called alive. Even in their death, they're called alive. Why? What does that mean? Why would they be considered alive even in their death? Kathy?
Well, the Hebrew word for life is the plural word, chaim.
Okay, good. The Hebrew word for life.
Physical to
Good.
Spiritual, you're still alive. It's life
You're
to
still
life.
alive, beautiful, and even in this world, right? Your good actions are still reverberating and are still giving birth to next stages. So therefore, when we're referring to the first 6 times, which is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, it says kavor metecha. The burial, so to speak, precedes the death. Bury the dead. The burial precedes the death. Whereas by a rasha, by an evil person, there the sages say that even in their lifetime, they're considered to be dead. Even when they're alive, they're considered to be dead. Because as we mentioned before, life is meant to be growth, growth, growth. That's what life is. That's the tov that we mentioned. The tov is these opportunities. And if a person is squandering those opportunities, then the person is not truly alive. Even in their lifetime, they're dead. And therefore, the 7th time said, Meitcha kavor. That was over there in verse 15. That was the last one. You're dead, you shall bury. That was the reference to Esav. That even in his lifetime, there, the death far preceded the burial. Now, what's so interesting is Ephron throughout, those who are following in the Hebrew, Ephron is spelled Ayin, Fe, Resh, Vav, Nun. Throughout, Ephron, Ephron, Ephron. That is how his name is spelled. If you take a look in verse 16, Vayishma, look at it in Hebrew, those who can. Vayishma Avraham el Ephron. Avraham heard Ephron. Ephron spelled properly. Ayin Pei Resh Vav Nun. Vayishkol Avraham. And Avraham paid out LeEphron to Ephron this money that he had spoken about, the 400 silver shekel. Ephron over there is written missing a Vav. All of a sudden, Ephron's name, you see at the very end of that line where it says 16, Tet Zayin, last word on the line is Ephron. There, Ephron is written missing a Vav. So on a certain level, right, Ephron became diminished as a result of his taking advantage of Avraham and not being straight with his dealings. So we are the sum result of our decisions and our actions. Ephron became diminished as a result of this, and he lost a letter from his name. But let's take it a step further. Let's look at the numerical value of the name Ephron. Ayin is 70. Pei is 80. So we're at 150. Resh is 200. So we're at 350. Nun is 50, bringing us up to 400. When Ephron is written without a Vav, it comes out to an even 400. What is 400? The grossly inflated price that he took from Abraham for the field and the cave that was in the midst, etc., etc., etc. So what is the Torah almost winking at us and letting us know? He became 400, right? A name is what reveals to us the essence of who we are. That's what a name reveals to us. A name is the essence of what? We say, the Or HaChaim says that every parent had prophecy. When they named us, they understood at our very essence who and what we are and what we could be. A name reveals our essence. Ephron's essence became 400 shekel. Abba mayot shekel. Over l'socher. That became the very essence of who he was. So on one hand, we have the Shnei Chaye Sarah, we have the years of the life of Sarah, taking every opportunity, Kulan Shavin Litova, taking every opportunity to become that much greater, contrasted to an Ephron, who had this opportunity of grandeur, and in turn, and instead, he transformed himself, he minimized himself into a $400 individual, 400 shekel. That became his very, very essence. Okay, my friends.
Oh, wait.
Good. Yes, Cheryl.
With Sarah and Hagar, and you were saying that I don't know, Rashi or someone said that she was very harsh, but didn't, and it was because of this decision that there's such enmity between us and them. But didn't Hashem say to Abraham, whatever she says you should do? So he knew what she was going to do, and he condoned it.
That's a good point. That's a good point, right? This is something that's often said at Sheva Brachas, right? That God told Avram, listen to your wife, right?
That's
Yeah, yeah.
and
It would seem that, look, very often there's the right thing to do, but there's the way that it is done that can be problematic. One of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Mandelkorn Zatzal, of blessed memory. So, he at times a boy, when I was teaching yeshiva in Israel, a boy needed to be asked to leave the yeshiva, right? But he'd say, we never kick someone out of yeshiva. No one's getting kicked. We don't throw anybody out of yeshiva. You throw out garbage. You don't throw out people. No one's being thrown out. And when a boy needed to be asked to leave, either that boy would be invited to stay at his house or sometimes at one of the other rabbis' houses until he would find another place to go. All right, so sometimes it's the right thing to do, but it could be done in an overly harsh manner. Right? And the pasuk there says, if I remember correctly, Vayi'aneha, that she really, really was afflicting her. So maybe asking her to leave was the right thing to do, but the treatment leading up to that, it seems, was unduly harsh, according to that Ramban.
so maybe that's why the angel came to rescue Ishmael.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I think we say also there we say Basher Husham, because at that point he was still righteous and therefore he deserved to be rescued. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's another thing. I know this is picky, but so what happened to Esau's head? Did it get, they had to bury it, I suppose. And
Yeah.
where did it go?
I'm not sure. When you go to Hebron now, you have different sections. You see Abraham and Sarah, right? There is no Esau's head section. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly where it ended up.
Oh.
Right? It was a cave. It could have simply rolled into the cave and sort of, self-buried itself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I don't want to think too graphically about that. But,
Okay. Just wondering.
all right. Yes, Aaron.
Why was Rachel excluded from that?
Okay. So Aaron asked, why was Rachel excluded from being buried there in Marat Machpelah? And there are a number of approaches to that. That's a good question, Aaron. Well, only one of the wives are going to be buried there. Leah was the first wife. Rachel died on the road, and according to what Yaakov later, we'll come to it later on, will tell Yosef that Hashem told me to bury her there along the road. It wasn't my own call to bury her there as opposed to Marat HaMachpelah, right? Leah was the first to get married, first to die, right? So then, the argument could have been made that Rachel should have gotten the first dibs to be buried there in Marat HaMachpelah, but Hashem told Yaakov told Yosef that Hashem told me that she should be buried there in Bethlehem. That's where Derech Bethlehem. That's where she is. That's where she on the way to Bethlehem. That's where she is buried. There are a number of other points there, which we'll come to more in detail when we get to those parashiot. But the question is asked: how could Yaakov have married two sisters? The Torah prohibits marrying two sisters. Well, it was before the Torah was given, but at the same time we have the teaching that the patriarchs and matriarchs kept the Torah beforehand. So one approach is that of the Ramban, who says that it was only there in Israel where they kept the Torah. And that's why, as Yaakov was returning with his wives, that's why Rachel died, or that's when Rachel died, before they entered Israel. So before they fully entered. So Rachel needed to be buried over there. And there's the famous medrash that Rachel is the one who's buried there, so that as we go out into exile, Rachel mevaka al baneha. Rachel is there crying on behalf of her sons, of her children, as they're going out into exile, and she continues to cry and advocate until Vishavu Banim Ligvulam, until all the children will return back to their boundaries. But that's something we can look into more as we get closer over there.
May I ask a question, Rabbi?
Sure.
About that. Is it also in the Navi as well, in Yirmiyahu, about Rachel's tears?
Yes.
That as well. And is that Haftorah read on Tisha B'Av or one of the fast days?
I believe it is read on, I believe Rosh Hashanah. I'm embarrassed, I don't know for sure, but I believe it's read on Rosh Hashanah. Actually, let me take a quick look. Rosh Hashanah Yom Aleph, Rosh Hashanah Yom Beis. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Page 1237. Those who want to take a look in the back of our Chumashim. That's Rosh Hashanah for second day. So said Hashem. Right. A voice heard on high, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel weeps for her children. She refuses to be consoled, for they are gone. So said Hashem, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears. There is reward for your accomplishment. The words of Hashem, they shall return from the enemy's lands. Yesh tikva la'achritech. There is hope for you ultimately. Noam Hashem, v'shavu banim ligvulam. The children return to their border. Second day Rosh Hashanah is only Gabriella.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Yes, Cheryl.
Isn't there a time when Yaakov was explaining to Yosef why he was buried there, because he didn't want Yosef to blame him or
right? Yeah, and that's when he says, and that it was al pi Hashem. It was based on what Hashem's direction. Don't think that it was my own unilateral decision. It was al pi Hashem. Yes, that's correct. Very good. Okay, my friends, good to be back. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, I strongly urge those who can come in person, and I thank Jenny, Rosa, and Aaron here in person. Very good. Okay. Good.
Thank
Kathy,
you.
good to see you. How are we feeling? Good.
Pretty good.
Good.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, you're looking good. Good to see you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Feel well. Okay.
Thanks.
how are you?